Hi, this is Benoy, your host of the Solar Maverick Podcast. I wanted to invite you personally to an event that we're having. It's called the Summer Solstice Fundraiser. It's on Thursday, June 20th from 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. in Jersey City, New Jersey. We're raising money for a great cause called Let's Share the Sun, which aids impoverished communities in harnessing solar energy. If you're interested in learning more about this event, you'll see it at the link of the notes of the podcast, and we hope to see you on June 20th. Thank you for listening to the Solar Maverick podcast, and have a great day.
I don't think that in 100 lifetimes we could have the impact that we had in those 2 years between the start of the Recovery Act and the end of the Recovery Act. Just being part of a pretty small team that put out over $30 billion, that is the reason Tesla still exists today, is the reason that the first 100 plus megawatt utility scale solar projects came online.
Hello and welcome to the Solar Maverick Podcast, where solar meets entrepreneurship and experience. I'm your host, Benoy Thanjan, so let's get into it.
Hi, this is Benoy, your host of the Solar Maverick Podcast. I'm really excited to have Herve Billet, who's the CEO of Sunvoy, and Joe Marhamati. He's the vice president, CFO, and co-founder. They're both founders of this company, Sunvoy. I'm excited to have you both because I think you're really fixing a need in the market. And welcome to the podcast. It would be great if you could tell us about Sunvoy and maybe a little bit both of your backgrounds before we start the interview.
Great. Well, thank you for having us on and give us our point of view on the solar industry. So Sunvoy is a software for solar installers. We build applications, we build apps in the App Store for solar installers, and it's a customer portal and solar fleet management system. Now, solar installers, we know a thing or two about solar installers because Joe and I, we've been running Ipsen Solar for a good 7-8 years. And what we really needed as a company is like a way to keep our customers informed during the construction process. When we go solar, it usually takes a few months, right? It's not installed the next day. And so when people spend a significant amount of money, it's not free and it's not like, it's more than $10. So a lot of customers want to know what happens with their project. So a lot of solar companies have project managers, keep the customers updated, but those project managers go on holiday, they get sick and things like that. So sometimes things fall through the cracks, just normal behavior. So having that communication fully automated and letting customers look into an app where things are at, it is a basic necessity for solar companies. We ended up building it ourselves, and very quickly, other solar CEOs approached us and they asked like, hey, can I also have this app? So very quickly, we built it for the solar companies and even international. We have customers all over the world now. And the really cool thing is that Joe and I, we got to speak to solar installers all over the world. And a lot of the problems are the same for the solar installers. Dealing with customers, keeping them up to date and showing the power production of those solar panels to the homeowner in a nice, easy to understandable way. Like those are common issues that solar installers face all over the world.
I definitely agree. And I think it's great that you've created this product where I think there's a lot of need. It's interesting because you're obviously going from being a solar installer and then having this product. What made you comfortable developing, a software product? I know that you have technical co-founder, probably killing his name, but Josh Brinkman. What made you comfortable to do something that's very different from, what you've done in the past?
Yeah, I think the idea that we had is not worth much. I think a lot of other solar installers thought about having their own app. A lot of installers we spoke with actually tried it themselves. This morning, talked with a customer of Sunvoy that admitted, and I didn't know that earlier, that he also tried to build his own app. 2 weeks ago, we spoke with somebody that spent hundreds of thousands of dollars to build that. And so what made us comfortable is not just having an idea, knowing what is business value, knowing that business really need this, but it's being able to execute on the plan. And that is really where Yasha comes in. So many months ago, I did several small IT projects like website design, some database issues, and so on. And I started working with Yasha. And after many projects, the amount of projects grew and then became more complex. And then one thing led to another. And it's like, well, this person is really phenomenal about how he can operate and really understands the business value of coding. It's not about creating features, right? Like everybody can create a feature, but it's being able to deliver something on time within the budget, understanding the marketing behind it. Like if you ask, can you create a button somewhere, that button needs to look good, needs to be centered on that page, for example, instead of like, oh yeah, okay, the button is somewhere, but go figure out where to put that button. So when you do software development, it really takes a village to really put it together. You need to have the product roadmap, you need to have so much design documentation, you need to be able to build it, and then you need to test it. And with Yasha, we did so much actually at once. So it just goes a lot faster. And that's why I like working with Yasha. So we really needed people that understand solar. That's where Joe comes in place, and he can sell as no other. And it's not even selling, it's really kind of educating and talking about solar. That's the beauty. So when we're on a sales call, it's more like showing what we build, and solar installers just fall in love with it. And so it's a very nice conversation to have.
Yeah, that's really interesting and exciting. So that's funny because I actually a while ago was helping a company develop a software to basically acquire residential customers online. And so we worked with a technical team, and one of the challenges was really getting things done on time and within budget, because then things, got extremely out of the budget. We thought outsourcing the software development that we could be able to do it quicker, but it was actually extremely challenging. So it's really hard to find a technical person and a technical lead, and that's great that you found that person, and that's exciting to hear what you're doing with Sunvoy. Joe, do you want to talk about like what your background is? I would be curious, like how did you both meet? What made you want to, work together first with, one venture and then now this, new venture? It would be great to understand that as well.
Yeah. So Herve and I have known each other for over 10 years now. We actually met at the Department of Energy. It was my first job out of grad school. I had an environmental studies degree, and this was around the time that the Department of Energy was implementing the Energy Policy Act of 2005, and specifically the Loan Program Office, which is now a very large group doing project finance under Jigger Shaw and deploying billions of dollars to some of the newest technologies. And that's been going on since the Recovery Act. So Herve and I were there in the first wave when they were funding the Tesla Model S, the first large utility scale solar projects, cellulosic ethanol, the first new nuclear in 30 years. And that was an amazing, exciting time that really catalyzed the modern solar industry as we know it. So there was this mad rush for literally, 2 years? So barely over 700 days to get $30 billion out the door from the Recovery Act. And we did it. We funded a lot of what is now the modern clean tech industry. And then in 2016, there was a change in administrations and a change in priorities. Herve moved to Belgium. I thought I'd never see him again. He came back after he learned that he just loved America too much and Europe would never hold a candle to our wonderful business culture. I was leaving DOE after that change in administrations, and we decided we wanted to start the best solar company in the country that was locally owned and operated, a certified B Corp, had the right values, was 100% vertically integrated, and took a lot of the lessons and technologies from the Department of Energy to build this local solar installer. And so we did that, and we've been doing that for over 7 years. And what we saw was the cost of acquisition was just stubbornly high. It was not going down in any meaningful way. And what we realized is the reason was probably because we were leaving our homeowners in the dark for 3 to 6 months or sometimes a year while their project was being developed. And then at PTO, permission to operate, when that system went online, we were handing the customer relationship over to the inverter manufacturer or the battery manufacturer on a silver platter. And those homeowners were forgetting who installed the system. Several years later, I actually met somebody at the NAPSEP conference this year who's in the solar industry, who had a booth at the NAPSEP conference, who thought that SMA installed his solar system. And I was blown away by that. And it just reinforced what we already knew, which is that homeowners are confused by the solar development process. It can be very frustrating. And then they're handed over to a manufacturer's monitoring app where the installer is not building brand equity with that homeowner. So that was really the inspiration to turn the customer portal that we built for Ipsen into Sunvoy so that we could provide this service to installers all over the world. And as Herve mentioned, we spend half of our time selling Sunvoy and the other half just helping solar installers learn from our experience, our lived experience building a solar installation company. And that is so satisfying and so much fun because we can have 10,000 times the impact by talking to installers all over the world than we can have solely by building an EPC.
Yeah, and that is really why we started Sunvoy. We were contemplating, what if we doubled Ipsen solar in size? What if we even quadrupled it? How much carbon emissions could we be saving? And then we were thinking like, well, what if we can make all solar installers across the world like just a few percentage better? What if we can improve their marketing? What if we just share more of the knowledge of running a solar company that we clearly see? I mean, we have a customer in Scotland, and he deals with the same core issues that solar installers deal with than our customers in Mexico or Chile. Like, it's a very common labor-intensive project, and some of it can be automated. Now, some of it cannot be automated, right? You need to use an impact to drill something. And if you put your impact, if you just put it randomly anywhere and you just spend your time looking for your tools, I cannot automate that piece. But the customer communication can be automated. Tasks can be automated. Fleet management, fleet monitoring, a lot of pieces can be automated. And so that's what we're building. So we try to help solar installers.
Yeah, that's amazing how you think about it. The impact that you could have is a lot more with a software platform. And you've learned so much with, obviously the company that you have that you're doing development and construction for residential. And it's interesting actually to hear the Department of Energy story. You guys are the original Solar Mavericks. And obviously that was foundational to where we are today. If you look at obviously all those technology, those companies, and as well as the 30%, ARERA grant at that time. We actually had Jigar Shah recently on the podcast, actually on the Solar Maverick Podcast, episode 149, where he talks about, what the Department of Energy is focused on now. And it's pretty amazing to see now how much, money is being allocated and funded through the Department of the Loan Program, which obviously you both started, and to see obviously the progression is pretty amazing. So thank you for, because this is all foundational to what we're doing today. So
I think we were a small piece in there. I don't think I can take credit for the entire loan program. We were there. Let's put it like that. We were there. We were present.
For sure. What I was thinking too, if you could talk about too, like how has the Inflation Reduction Act obviously impacted Sunvoy's, business or prospects for the future, because it's supposed to be for 10 years.
Well, I think if I can put my EPC hat on first, I think the Inflation Act had a profound impact on the business, but actually I think in negative ways, so that when you sell something, you need to have pressure to sell soon, right? Otherwise, people just delay the decision all the time. And so if not that government incentive is available for 10 years, that provides stability for the business, knowing that it's there, but it reduces the reason to act now. And then people just delay the decision. So the homeowner just tends to delay the decision. Now, it also coincides with a change in interest rates. So who knows what had the biggest impact? Maybe the interest rate more than Inflation Reduction Act coming into play. But yeah, we saw around that time a decrease in sales on the residential side. Commercial is a different beast, right? And community solar utilities is quite drastic industries, very separate. But that's my point of view on that.
Definitely, that makes sense. And an interesting point that you both mentioned, and obviously you have the experience with this, obviously IP, Sun Solar, and Sunvoy, is like the customer acquisition cost is such a major part of cost related to acquire the customer. Obviously, your software platform, Sunvoy, helps with lowering that. Can you talk about, it would be great if you could educate our audience and talk about for residential, normally what's the expense related to customer acquisition?
Yeah, no, it's not uncommon to have a cost of acquisition that's $2,500 to $3,000 or more. And right now it's higher than it's ever been because of interest rates, because it's harder for these projects to pencil out. And that is an extraordinary cost. I mean, it costs more to acquire the customer in many cases than it does to install the project. Like the labor to actually do the work to physically install the project, which is extraordinary. I heard kind of a tongue-in-cheek joke that's got some truth to it, which is that nobody buys solar, they're only sold solar. And that really stuck with me because it does feel that way. I was actually walking with my neighbor last night. We're walking our dogs from the park. This guy has been asking me questions about solar for 5 years. Every time I see him, he asks me another question. And I realized at some point, I can't convince this guy to even sit down for an appointment. Hopefully he doesn't listen to this. Because he just needs to ask me 100 questions about solar over 5 to 10 years for him to be comfortable to sit down for an appointment. And this is a highly educated developer, coder. He could sit down and figure out solar, but he's so intimidated by it that he's afraid to do it, and he wants to ask me questions over 5, 10 years, comfortable to do it. And this is very common, very, very common. People are so intimidated by solar, and we're trying to do our part to just demystify it a little bit, make it more accessible. And there are a lot of elements in Sunvoy to do that. One example that we rolled out last year, we gave a landing page for every single homeowner in Sunvoy, and there are over 150,000 sites in Sunvoy. So there are 150,000 people out there who have their own landing page specific to their home and their community that show all their environmental benefits, that show all the reviews across every review site on the internet of their solar installer, that show every single installation in their community. So they can share that with their friends and family to demystify solar, to beg some questions of their network about what their experience was like. Because I think the reason the cost of acquisition is so high, in part, among many reasons in the US market, is that people are just really intimidated by it.
This episode of the Solar Maverick Podcast is brought to you by Podcast Laundry, the podcast concierge service that I use to make sure that my listeners hear the best quality show. They do the dirty work of podcasting for me. Yes, graphics, quotes, show notes, master editing, and much more. All I have to do is record. So if you're a busy podcaster like me with an engaged audience and want to free up time to do more of what you love to do, like going to the gym or spending time with loved ones, go to podcastlaundry.com to schedule your consultation or call 347-871-8273. That's podcastlaundry.com or 347-871-8273. Thank you.
That's really interesting feedback. I think the other thing too I hear is like everyone thinks, oh, the technology is going to keep getting better. The costs are going down. I could, wait to, also people are not that understanding of the incentives. So that's the whole education process that I've seen with the residential customers. Obviously, when a person buys an EV, it's probably easier to sell a residential system, especially with the charging. I mean, that's really interesting perspective on that. And then how do you differentiate from like competitors in the industry? Like I know of some kind of similar sorts of platforms that try to integrate different components into their app. Obviously, there's a huge, I think, market for what you're doing, and white labeling, which is a key part of the customer experience, right, is something that's huge. And obviously all the information. And as you said, which is crazy to me, Joe, about the 160,000 landing pages for each and every customer. So it'd be interesting to hear like what makes Sunvoy different from the other companies or software platforms. Or it's interesting because people just are looking at it from different ways.
Well, you want a round robin, Herve? You take one and I'll take one. We'll go back and forth until we run out.
We've never done that. It's a good idea. I would say white labeling. And Benoy, you said that yourself. Like, I don't know another platform that's white label like us.
Yes.
Okay, I'll say the native Tesla integration. To my knowledge, we're the only piece of software in the solar industry that has a native Tesla integration, which means that you can view your Powerwall data, your solar production, your consumption, load control, all within the app of the solar installer. Even if it's all coming from Tesla's API, there's no need to third-party authenticate the data. It will flow directly through from the hardware and communication devices into the app of the solar installer. Even Samsung doesn't have that. So we're very proud of that one. And I'll take credit because Herve did all the work to make that happen.
Yes, I did. So another one I would say is resources. So people come and they're interested in the software, but I'm going to say it's not uncommon. It's super common that we tell people like, hey, this is what we've done. And so we put people in contact with banking. They can change banks where we offer them different lines of credits options. It's not me offering line of credits, but like, hey, we were able to get $1 million line of credit, no strings attached, not based on your inventory or accounts receivables. And when people hear that, it's like, how the heck did you do that? And so we provide just different resources. People that need some HR restructuring, or they need different resources about just different people we can put them in contact with in the industry. And that's a big help. It's not just the software. So we just share our experiences of being a solar installer.
And, I think having the white label apps in the Google Play and Apple App Store, I don't know anybody doing that. You could go find a developer to do that for you for tens of thousands of dollars, or you could have somebody do it and I would say built by ABC developer. But when we build these apps for solar installers, it says built by ABC Solar. It doesn't say Sunvoy anywhere in the Google Play or Apple App Store. It literally looks like the solar installer built it for the homeowner. And I don't know of anybody else doing that. I'll throw another one out. We're the only ones in the solar software space who know how to upload and import all of your legacy sites on day one. So any solar installer can see every single site they've ever built, every inverter, every battery, every piece of hardware on a single map with a real-time view of the status and the performance of that site in a single view. And that is really hard to do. That was the single hardest piece of Sunvoy to build, and something we're very proud of that adds a ton of value for active monitoring and service for installers.
Yeah, the difficulty is like solar installers have data all over the place. Some in the CRM, and then sometimes another legacy CRM where not all the data didn't transition. And then they have different inverters and some other hardware with batteries. And so Sunvoy taps into all of that, just grabs it and just stitches it together. Sometimes you have, like a husband and a wife that goes solar, and only the husband is named in the CRM. But when you decommission, they put the wife's name in the inverter platform. And so how do you stitch all that together? That's some complicated piece. And so we're able to solve that problem with a quite complex algorithm. And so that's what the core of Sunvoy. Another piece I think where we're unique is we bootstrapped. There's not many software platforms in our industry that we know of that are fully bootstrapped. And so what that generates is that we need to keep listening to the customer. Instead of going off, get some money and go build something that we think people are interested in, we are very close to our customers, listening to what they really need.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's huge. And, everyone thinks that you have to raise capital to start, especially like a software business. So that's interesting to hear that you obviously bootstrapped, and obviously the experience that you have from, IP Sun helps with building those partnerships with the installers and understanding the issues that customers will have. So that's pretty interesting as well. And then I'm sure it's user friendly. I think sometimes, you give the customer the login for the monitoring system, and sometimes it's very difficult for the customer to navigate. So that's great that you're doing that.
And I'll add something to that. Now it's not uncommon to hand a homeowner 4 or 5 different apps at PTO, right? Because they've got their solar, they've got their consumption monitoring, they've got their battery, their load control, their EV charger. Imagine you've spent 50 grand on this system or 100 grand or whatever, and you get 5 different monitoring apps at PTO. That is just such a confusing experience for the homeowner, because no one's going to use 5 apps to check on their system. But if they're already living in the app of the solar installer because they tracked their project from beginning to end in that app, and then at PTO, it turns over to show all the energy data, that is a very clean and clear experience for the homeowner that's also building brand equity for the solar installer for 30 years. So it's just a night and day difference in terms of the experience and the status quo of the solar industry, where we've added all these new products and apps and monitoring platforms to having one uniform experience that's directly from the company that actually educated the homeowner and built the system.
Yeah, definitely. That's a huge differentiator.
I may have a scoop for you. We have something to announce. So we're adding a new service to Sunvoy. It's called the API service. So we connect with so many inverters and different hardware pieces that we are now making that data available to API to others. So imagine you're a large solar installer and you want to build your own app, like a lot of really large solar installers are in that category, and they want to have the data, but they have multiple inverters. So either you go build all their inverter API connections, or you're going to go through a platform like us. And if you install whatever inverter brand you have, and since we work all over the world, we have so many inverters that I even never heard of the name, some I cannot even pronounce. And so we have those all the APIs that we build and maintain. So if you have a customer, like you type in the name or the address, phone number, or email or something, and we just return you the data of all the hardware, kilowatt hours, battery, like everything that's connected to that homeowner.
Yeah, that's huge. And I appreciate you sharing that, Herve. I mean, I feel like you're simplifying, everything to enhance the customer experience and obviously build that loyalty with the installer and making things easy for the installer to basically integrate your software into it, especially, being able to download it from Google Play or Apple. So that's really interesting. I was going to ask, I know you both work the DOE, like what are some of the difference between working at the DOE versus compared to like starting your own business or multiple companies?
Oh, that's a good one. I don't think that in 100 lifetimes we could have the impact that we had in those 2 years between the start of the Recovery Act and the end of the Recovery Act. Just being part of a pretty small team that put out over $30 billion, that is the reason Tesla still exists today, is the reason that the first 100 plus megawatt utility scale solar projects came online. Just to be a percentage part of that group of people did that was incredible. However, in 2016, when the new administration came in and told us we're going to zero out your budget and we don't want you to do anything, that's the downside. And that's actually something that I have a ton of respect for lifelong civil servants. They can go through those peaks and valleys of having supportive administrations and having unsupportive administrations of what they do every day. That's something that I think Herve and I have too much nervous energy to be able to do, sit around for 4 years. And so we've had obviously a lot of impact in the solar industry too, and it's been consistent and it's been incremental. I think when you're in government, at least in our experience, obviously the loan program is maybe a unique animal, but we were able to have just once in 1,000 lifetimes type of impact on the energy transition that we might never get to have again. And now we're having very slow and steady incremental progress in the private sector.
Yeah, I'd like to add, I was also a consultant. Like Joe was a real Fed. I was a contractor. I had a chance as a consultant to have worked obviously for the Department of Energy, but also for the USPS, for the Department of Education, like a lot of different government institutions and Red Cross and other large organizations. And those are large organizations. They don't change easily and they have a certain speed at which they move. Whereas the biggest difference when you're a small business, like it depends on you. If you don't get out of bed on time that day, projects will go wrong. So you have an impact. You can see your impact a lot better than when you're part of a larger entity, but then the impact is probably smaller. When you look at what we do now at Ipsen Solar, you can see like a fleet of everything we installed over the years. You can see the megawatts produced and the gigawatt hour produced over the years. When you look at Sunvoy, we can see a map of all our solar installers across the US, across the world. Is just more gigawatt hours. So if you can have an impact there, it's just a bit better. Now, when you're part of like a government institution, like the impact is just huge if it goes well. So
that's interesting perspectives, and I appreciate you both sharing it. And I was excited too when Joe and I did the pre-interview before to hear about Sun CRM. Can you talk about that new application that you're working on? Or I don't know if you're actually using it today or selling it to customers.
Yeah, I'll let Joe speak about it. He's super excited about it.
Yeah, so suncrm.solar, if you go to www.suncrm.solar, you'll see we're actually building out a solar version of HubSpot and Salesforce, two of the biggest enterprise CRMs, customer relationship management softwares in the world. And it's super exciting because we actually built it ourselves, hands-on at Ipsen. We developed a solar version of HubSpot, which means solar-specific deal properties and workflows and marketing automations, contact properties, reporting, service, you name it. And it's something that, now any solar installer in the world can take off the shelf and have implemented immediately. And then they can customize to their business and to their processes in either HubSpot or in Salesforce. So here's why that matters. There's a lot of CRMs out there. We love them all because Sunvoy integrates with like 50 CRMs or something ridiculous like that. And there's a lot of solar specific CRMs, and we love all of them. We love all innovation in the solar industry. But we really think that if you want to grow an EPC to $100 million or more, or $50 million or more, you really need either a HubSpot or a Salesforce to do that because they're infinitely scalable and infinitely customizable. But, we had the experience of having to build that homegrown solar specific for over 5 years. And now any solar installer can take our lessons and just have it on day one. And that's pretty cool. So we're really proud of that. And it kind of happened by accident. When we were selling Sunvoy last several years, every single time we talked to somebody, they would ask us for our opinion on CRMs. What CRM do you like? I hate my CRM. I want a new one. And it just happened over and over and over. And we kept kind of farming it out to other people. And then we realized, okay, the demand for this is just so high and we know how to do this. So suncrm.solar is now allowing solar installers to have a solar version of HubSpot or Salesforce day one that is out of the box, off the shelf, and is fully functional with continuous updates and support.
And it's also in line with our goal of fighting climate change. One, we know there is a demand, so installers need a tool like that. And two, we're not going to spend our time building another CRM. There are already so many CRMs in the world, and competing with Salesforce and HubSpot doesn't make sense because those are large entities and they are really good at what they do. And so we know the solar industry, building another CRM doesn't make sense. So it's partnering up with them and making something that works better and easier for solar installers.
Yeah, I mean, I totally could relate to this because, work on trying to work with Salesforce and HubSpot on changing the CRM to make it more solar specific, but to have something out of the box where people have obviously a tremendous amount of experience in the industry to do that saves so much time for all the companies that use your CRM. So I think it's a huge benefit. I appreciate you both creating this. And obviously we'll have, the suncrm.solar on the notes of the podcast as well so that people could look at it. What advice would you give to Solar Maverick Podcast about solar and entrepreneurship? What advice would you give to entrepreneurs?
It needs to happen now. So much in the solar industry is still new, and a lot in the solar industry is still needs to be invented, quite frankly. So we need better marketing, what Joe mentioned earlier about educating the homeowner. We need ways to convert people, like onboarding easier, better way to install the products, even racking, like how do you attach it to the roof? You would think that's basic, but man, that thing keeps changing. And the first time installed was actually a uni-rack and had lots of bolts and nuts, and then they just fall on the roof, and at the end of the project you need to go clean up that gutter full of bolts and nuts, and now it's just so much faster, so much easier, but I'm sure we can still do a lot better. The financing aspect, I think that is still a lot to be invented. I mean, the PPA got invented and so on, but I think we can still come up with new novel ways. So much in the solar industry still needs to happen, still needs to be created. I mean, the fact that you can still talk to the early solar developers, the people that literally created that industry, they're still here. And so it's a very young industry. So I think the entire industry needs to still reinvent itself, and there's still so much to be done. So hopefully all your listeners are part of this, and if they are not, just get along, like jump on the bandwagon, and we need to keep doing our best.
Yeah, and obviously the industry continues to grow exponentially. Obviously there's the solar coaster, and I apologize, I was saying IP Sun instead of Ipsen, for your residential contracting company. So I apologize that I was saying that. And also, I would love to get your outlook of what you see happening in the industry or prediction. I know that wasn't mentioned before in our pre-interview, but I think it would be great to get your unique perspective because I feel like, with all these three different things like Ipsen, Sunvoy, Solar CRM, you probably have a good perspective of what's happening in the industry more than, a lot of other people. And then also, too, working in the DOE, too, which has been a big part of the growth of the industry, especially in the U.S. I think it would be great to hear your perspectives.
I'll tell you what I would like to see happen. I don't know if those are predictions or not, but I would love to see more innovation. Specifically, I cannot wait until the first, maybe this has already happened, actually, I just don't know about it, but the first AI to sell a solar system. That is going to be revolutionary for the cost of acquisition. Because if you've ever sold solar, and I've sold hundreds of systems, it's usually the same 10 questions. So if you can train an AI on how to sell at least the solar only, once you get into some of the peripherals and storage and so forth, it gets harder. But if you can get an AI to sell solar, and there's a lot of people working on it right now, that could really put a big dent in the cost of acquisition. Now, you've got the Project Solars and the Mona Lees that are trying to reduce the cost of acquisition and seem to be having good success at doing that. So there's a lot of innovation going on there with the kind of virtual sales model. I really would love to see Solar App progress in more of the 18,000 AHJs that we have now. It was obviously a software built by the Department of Energy to streamline solar permitting, having that integrated into the tech stack, so that when you sell a system, you can have it permitted in a week. I think that's something that could happen in the majority of AHJs in the next 5 years if Solar App is adopted. Now, not every AHJ wants it. There are some intransigent AHJs that are proud of how difficult they are to get through. We won't name them, though. I'm not going to do that. But most of them, I think, are open to innovation. So those are a couple areas. where, I would like to see things progress. And then just getting more creative with financing. There's a couple folks out there that are offering 30-year financing, like the true solar mortgage. And as you're starting to add more stuff, storage and EV charging and consumption monitoring and load control, it obviously adds to the cost. And interest rates aren't going down anytime soon to what they were, 2 years ago. So having a true solar mortgage where you can go 30 years, either integrated with your mortgage or standalone, just makes it more accessible for more people. So that's my wish list. I don't know if it's my predictions, but that's what I'm hoping will happen. But you were right.
Well, yeah, also straddle between wish list and prediction. Panel price. Solar panel price went down, and then they for years, and then they really suddenly crashed. Really, really low pricing suddenly, and then they go back up. So that is hard. So if you do commercial solar, you put a panel price in, and then if the price goes lower, man, you win, you're happy. But the opposite happens too. And so now a lot of contracts get canceled or like in trouble. So I hope for like more stable solar prices. Yeah, maybe that's a clear wish. Other pieces that I maybe also wish for, no, that's maybe a prediction, is that utilities see the benefits of solar. And I think it's going to be more and more playing to have solar interaction on the grid. I'm in contact with some European partners there that deal with it all the time because there's a lot of penetration of solar on the grid and they have to adjust their voltage ranges all the time on the distribution. And so they are affected by it already daily and they cannot just, go build more shunt stations everywhere. So there is a lot of technology that needs to be invented there, a lot of predictions. Hopefully Sunvoy can also play a part there. And so there's still a lot to be discovered, to be figured out. And that's the fun part of the industry, I think.
Oh, for sure. And I think just like the solar app, I think that will hopefully streamline a lot of the permitting. Interconnection is something that hopefully we could streamline, like some of these things that I think are obvious. And then, as you said, Herve, like panel pricing, I mean, it's been challenging, obviously, with now potentially new tariffs on Chinese manufacturers, South Asian manufacturers. So we'll see, what happens because we still don't have enough domestic production yet. And it takes time for that to happen. So hopefully in the future, when we're able to control the supply chain more, because there's a lot more domestic production, that'll lead to, steadier and lower prices. But I don't know if you think differently, that hopefully in the future we'll be able to fix that issue.
A big domestic manufacturing base would bring that price stability, I guess. Let me ask you the question, like, how do you deal with your project development in New Jersey and so on? Like, how do you deal with that price fluctuation when you develop projects?
So that's the challenging part, right? Because when we initially were developing the project, we had, panel price assumptions. And actually, we've seen a lot of people get burned by locking in prices or warehousing or, under the ITC trying to, safe harbor panels. So I think the challenge is like, obviously the panels are a major cost of the projects. How we've handled that is being extremely conservative on the pricing and then making decisions as it gets closer, and hopefully it's lower at that time. But obviously we've seen the opposites, and then we try to be more efficient on the other aspects of the project development or construction, whether that be like the racking or, any other sort of parts that you could play around with. But it's definitely a huge issue. And during COVID, obviously, it was that whole supply chain issue as well. So it's a complicated problem, actually, and everyone handles it differently. But I wouldn't lock in pricing just because I think there's more possibility of pricing going down than up. But it's not an easy question to answer.
And yet we all need to run our businesses and take it into account. Implicitly, you have a solution, or at least you assume one. So, yeah.
It's a solution. Herve and Joe, this has been an amazing podcast. I appreciate both of you making time out of your schedule. And I'm really excited because I think you guys are doing amazing things in the industry, and these products and solutions will really have a huge impact. If our listeners want to learn more about you and Sunvoy Solar CRM, what's the best way that they could do that?
Well, they can go to www.sunvoy.com and try the free version. If you go into the footer of the website, there is a link to the free version of Sunvoy just to get started and check it out.
Great. So we'll have that on the notes of the podcast as well. thank you again to both of you, and look forward to hearing about the success. And I'm sure everything is going to grow exponentially. It's amazing that you're doing on Sunvoy. You have 116,000 customers on there, and I can't imagine how it'll be like in 3 to 5 years. So congratulations on your success, and wishing you both continued success on what you're doing.
Want to come back on your podcast in 2 years, 3 years?
For sure, definitely.
All right.
I'll have you interview. Yeah, that's awesome.
Thanks, Benoy, for the opportunity.
Thank you. Oh, anytime.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Solar Maverick Podcast. The Solar Maverick Podcast is brought to you by Reneu Energy. We're a solar development and consulting firm. If you believe that this podcast is adding value to you, please give us a 5-star review and share with those that you think could benefit from this information. Please email all questions, suggestions, and feedback to info@reneuenergy.com. That's info@reneuenergy.com. The Solar Maverick Podcast is produced by Podcast Laundry and executive produced by Benoy Thanjan and Kevin Y. Brown.